guys, DJParson here, and I'm back with the last of the tier lists, or the last update for the tier lists for now, and we have reached age 3, which is by far the hardest age to rank these. I was considering not doing this list at all, because it's so hard to say, so much depends on the game state. But I still will try my best to give you an overview of where I think the leaders and the wonders stand at the moment and what has changed from my last rankings 1.5 years ago. These are the standings that I made back then, and we're going to take a look what has maybe changed. So something that definitely has changed is Pierre is not seen as much anymore. I think one reason might be that overall culture, there's more culture production in H2, there's more Bach, more Shakespeare, and also more big production in H3. Pierre was always good in giving you very cheap culture production with the arenas and the one-time boost of 8 culture once. But if everybody has more culture production, that 8 culture and the 2 culture production doesn't reach high enough of an impact to justify him being that good. So I think Pierre sadly will have to go down from the S tier. Probably into A tier. I still really like him. He's still in the correct games. He's still super strong if you have a lot of have a lot of arenas, especially because they are so cheap. You can easily get 3 Brand Circuses or something, and then 6 culture production plus the 8. It's just very solid. So I think he definitely belongs in A tier. You can even use him just once for the 8 culture. Sometimes if you have a good H2 leader, for example Shakespeare, and you want to get the maximum out of Shakespeare, and then use Pierre once for the 8 culture, that is an option. Bill Gates, I haven't seen him played as much recently. Maybe also has to do something with there being more printing presses and more journalism, so you don't see scientific method and computers quite as often. I still think because he has such a high potential, he still belongs to the S tier. If you get him early, he can just single-handedly win you the game. So yeah, it's hard to say, but I still think he has the highest potential, so I think he belongs still in the S tier. In the A tier, Churchill, always super solid. He has so many different things that he can give you. Military, like a military insurance. He can give you the 3 culture turn, which is not bad, and then he also has the potential to help you with wars. So he's super solid. And even if you don't have any setup, if it's a super messy game, you have no setup for the other leaders, 3 culture is pretty solid in H3. It's not as good as others, but he's still super solid. Marlene also, especially with Bach being as prominent now, you see a lot of operas, a lot of theaters in general, and there Marlene is super strong, giving you the strength, especially in 2 players. I think I will even put her into S tier now that we have the space, because Pierre is going down, Marlene is gonna go up. You see a lot of theaters, and she gives you happy faces, strength, and culture. She also works together with Hollywood, leader Wanda, that also is gonna go up probably. So I think she belongs to the S tier, and Pierre now into A tier. In the B tier, we have Einstein and Jobs, so the computer leaders. I think they have to go down a little bit, because again, computers not seen as much anymore. I still like Einstein slightly more, and the question is also, what do we do with Sid Meier? So the computer leaders in general will go down. I will start with Sid Meier. I think some of the D leaders will go up, Sid Meier will go down. Into the D tier, it's very rarely that you get the computers with Sid Meier and produce enough. Especially because the other options for culture are just higher. You start in H2 with the culture production with Shakespeare, Bach, Gaudi, and then you can switch into H3 leaders like Fleming or Chaplin, or in general just have the culture production already, so you don't need Sid Meier to improve your scientific methods or your computers. So Sid Meier is going down to D tier. Steve Jobs definitely into C tier. I mean, he has potential, of course. So the question is, who's gonna go up for these 2? I definitely think let's go like that. Let's start at the bottom. Who's going up? Up is definitely going Mandela. Mandela is very solid. If you have colonies, if you have a healthy yellow bank, he can produce a lot of culture. He gives you the civil action. The only downside that he really has is his 3 extra civil actions, that it's not that easy to avoid paying. But I still think he is a leader that probably belongs into B tier. He's very, very solid, can produce a lot of culture and the extra civil action. And then, yeah, just even if you don't have that many extra yellow cubes, you don't produce that much extra culture. Still the 2 culture production plus 1 civil action. And he's also relatively okay for some impacts like government and so on. So I think he belongs at B tier, and I might also put Fleming into B tier or into C tier, one of those two. Fleming, yeah, especially in 2 players, if you can see your opponent's cards, I still would prefer it maybe if Fleming could look at the same hand 2 times in a row, because this rule makes him not as good in 2 players. They only can look at the hand of your opponent every 2 turns. So most of the time you only look once or twice. But especially because Hollywood is stronger, you see more, as I'm gonna repeat quite often probably, you see more journalisms. So you can have either printing presses or journalisms plus movies then, or you have printing presses and operas, and then you upgrade your printing press to multimedia, and then he's very strong and gives you a lot of culture production. So I think he's gonna go to B tier. And then Einstein, Steve Jobs. I don't see the biggest difference between these two. They both, I think Einstein is a little bit more flexible, but Steve Jobs has a little bit of a higher ceiling. So it's hard to differentiate these two. So I will keep both of them in C tier. Chaplin, yeah, I could move him up. The problem is, yeah, the 2 happy faces can be quite solid. You don't see him that often though, especially if you have already theaters. The better solution to happy faces then is Marlene Dietrich. She just gives so much more. Sometimes not more culture production, but then there's more happy faces quite often, and the strength bonus that she can give. So I think he belongs into D tier. And then it's so hard to rank someone like Gandhi. You can win you the game, or you can just be useless. Marie Curie, you see a lot of iron and not as much coal, and not much computers. I think I will put down Marie Curie to the D tier as well, because computers aren't seen that often. You'd rather go for something else. She is solid. I mean, even these D tier leaders, as I always repeat, they can still have their situation. Marie Curie can be like a jack of all trades, give you strength, give you science and culture production. So she can be quite solid, but if you already have computers, you often don't need the extra science, and if you have oil, for example, you have so much already that the thing that she gives you extra isn't as big. You'd rather have more culture production, like if you go for movies and multimedias with all of your rocks, you'd rather go for Fleming then. So these are the leaders, how I would put them. A little bit of movement, especially yeah, from the D tier to B tier, Mandela and Fleming. I think they have shown more strong games and proven themselves a little bit more. And then the computer leaders going down 1 step each. So now for the wonders. Wonders, of course, also really hard to rate, but the one wonder that we see more and more recently is Hollywood. I think I would put Hollywood into the B tier, just because the potential is so high. You can easily see 30, 40 culture from the Hollywood. Something that definitely has to go down is Manhattan Project. I don't see it as strong anymore. The strength boost is nice, but you don't see a lot of culture from the Manhattan Project. And then it's still 14 rocks for 13 strength. Depending on your tactic, you can more easily do that with just units. So I don't see as much value from the Manhattan anymore. I think I'd probably put it into the B or C tier. Let's put it into C tier, I think. Internet can probably still stay in the D tier, just because it's a lot of steps. And it just fails in the comparison to Hollywood most of the time. So they are kind of kind of equal or kind of work similarly, but Hollywood most of the time just gives you more in the right position, also saves civil actions. Internet is just so hard. You often want to grab and finish the wonder in the same turn, and that is really hard for internet. You need the engineering or the architecture for that. So internet, I think, will stay down. Also Empire State a bit, I think. I'm not the biggest fan of Empire State. If you are ahead in everything, most of the time you are already winning. So the Empire State is kind of the case. If you have a lot, you can gain a lot, but then you don't need it as much. So I would probably have it in D tier. United Nations can stay in C. You don't see the biggest impacts that often from it. Also the problem is, especially in 2 players, you usually want to finish your wonder in your last turn, because if you do it earlier, you kind of open yourself up for wars if you spend your rocks too early, and then you have your best impacts in the deck already and you can't get them twice. Sometimes it works out, but United Nations can stay in C tier. International Red Cross can stay in S tier, I think. Just to highlight the importance of it being in, I always check, is the Red Cross in the game? And if it is, it changes the approach for H3 quite a little bit. So I think just to highlight the importance, if you want to look at the tiers in importance, do you check if they are there? Do they influence the whole game? The Red Cross is definitely one that changes the whole game from the beginning a little bit, making food production more important, making ocean land a little bit less good, making irrigation worse, and definitely highlighting the high food production from Mech Egg, for example. So we have an empty space in A tier. The fast food chain and space flight are always good. Fast food chains maybe a little bit more, so I definitely think if one of these two is gonna go up, it is the fast food chains, because you're always gonna get quite a lot from that, and it is better steps. One problem with the space flight is the steps are not really equal. 1, 2, 4, and 9 can give you some problems sometimes. If you want to start building on it, if you want to build 1 or 2 steps already with spaceflight, you run into more problems with corruption, and with fast food it's just a little bit easier to avoid that. Could also put the Hollywood into A tier, but for that it's just not flexible enough, so I think I will put the fast food into the A tier, because it's always going to be at least okay. Sometimes, or most of the time, it's going to be good. If you get around 21, 22 culture from it, you get that most of the time, and that's very solid. And sometimes you get more, like 26, but that's hard. There the space filler has a little bit higher overall potential. You can get 30 culture spaceflight sometimes, but only in very crazy games where you get computers and all. It has potential. But I think if one of these wonders is an A tier, then it's fast food chains. So yeah, these are the rankings, my updated rankings. We saw the biggest movement from the Hollywood and from the Manhattan Project. Manhattan Project, yeah, as I said, not the biggest fan anymore. Just feels like underwhelming sometimes. You waste a lot of rocks. And if you very rarely see more than 1 H3 wonder. If you have to go for the Manhattan Project and get like 4, 5, 6 culture because you have to get the strength for defending, then your opponent just gets a wonder himself and produces enough even without wars. So that's my biggest problem with that one. Can be good, of course, if you have high science, you get the culture and the strength. Don't see that often. And yeah, these are the rankings. I hope you had fun. Let me know what you think, if I made some mistakes or how you like to play. But often there's no right or wrong. There's just some people prefer that, others prefer different things. So I hope you enjoyed the video and see you for the next one, guys.